You've been told your entire life to trust the experts. You've been taught that the consensus view, the collective wisdom of the crowd, is almost always the correct view. You feel a deep, instinctual, and comforting sense of safety in agreeing with the majority. It feels right. It feels smart. It is the path of least resistance. But what if the entire crowd, with all its experts, all its leaders, and all its confident pronouncements, is marching together in perfect lockstep off the edge of a cliff? What if the only sane person in the world is the one who is standing still, watching in horror, and screaming, "Stop"? What if the very feeling of safety is the ultimate illusion? This is the story of Dr. Michael Burry, a one-eyed, socially awkward, heavy metal-loving medical doctor turned hedge fund manager who in the mid-2000s saw something that no one else, not the CEOs of the biggest banks, not the Nobel Prize-winning economists, not the Federal Reserve itself, could or would see. He saw that the entire American housing market, the very bedrock of the global economy, was a gigantic, fraudulent house of cards, an elaborate fantasy, and it was about to collapse. This was not a guess. It was not a gut feeling. It was a conviction, a cold, hard, mathematical certainty forged not in the echo chamber of a Wall Street boardroom, but in the quiet solitude of his office, late at night, as he personally, page by painful page, pored over thousands of complex and mind-numbingly boring mortgage bond prospectuses. Most people at the time saw the U.S. housing market as the safest investment in the world. It was an article of faith. Prices had never gone down on a national level. The entire system was supported by a powerful, intoxicating narrative of American prosperity and the ownership society. They were caught in a massive global wave of social proof, a mania of collective belief. But you are not most people. You are a rational thinker. You are a student of reality. And you must understand what Burry was doing. He was engaging in the ultimate act of independent thought. He turned off the noise from the television. He ignored the confident, self-serving pronouncements of the experts. He rejected the comforting, warm embrace of the consensus. He did the one thing that almost no one else was willing to do. He did the work. He did not trust the summaries. He did not trust the ratings. He went back to the source documents, the raw data, and he read the fine print. And in that fine print, buried under layers of legal jargon, he discovered the secret. He saw that these supposedly AAA rated rock-solid mortgage bonds were not filled with solid, reliable loans. They were filled with toxic, fraudulent subprime mortgages that were designed to fail from the very beginning. This is the first and most crucial lesson of this story. The beginning of all great contrarian thinking is not genius. It is work. It is the discipline to do your own analysis, to find the ground truth, and to form your own opinion based on the raw facts, not on the beautiful stories that everyone else is telling. Burry was not a prophet. He was a detective. And he had just found the first clue in what would become the greatest financial crime of the 21st century. He now knew a terrible truth that no one else believed. But knowing the truth and having the courage to act on it are two very different things. And his next move would be an act of rebellion against the entire world. You have been told your entire life that the consensus is a safe harbor, that there is wisdom in the crowd, that to stand alone against the judgment of every expert, every institution, and every single one of your peers is the very definition of insanity. This is the story you have been sold to keep you compliant. It is a story designed to make you comfortable with mediocrity. But now, you must understand the reality of Michael Burry. He had discovered a terrible truth. He knew the world was on fire, even if no one else could see the smoke. What do you do with that knowledge? Most people would do nothing. They would be paralyzed by doubt. The sheer, overwhelming weight of the social proof of every bank, every rating agency, every news anchor, every single expert telling them they were wrong would be too much to bear. They would tell themselves, I must be the one who is crazy. It's impossible that I am the only one who sees this. They would retreat into the comforting silence of the crowd. But you are not most people. You are a rational thinker. And you must understand that true conviction is not measured by how many people agree with you. It is measured by your willingness to act on your own rigorous independent analysis, especially when no one else does. Michael Burry did not just have a theory, he had a conviction, and he decided to act. He walked into the offices of the largest investment banks on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, and he made them a proposition. He wanted to buy a new kind of insurance, a financial instrument called a credit default swap that would pay out massively if and only if the seemingly untouchable U.S. housing market collapsed. The reaction from the bankers on the other side of the table was not respect. It was a mixture of confusion, pity, and barely concealed glee. They saw him as a fool, a weirdo, the easy money. They were so blinded by their own overconfidence and the powerful incentives of their bonus culture that they could not comprehend what he was doing. They were selling what they believed was free money, a policy on a house that could never burn down. This is a critical lesson. When you have a truly contrarian insight, the world will not greet you with applause. It will greet you with ridicule. It will call you crazy. And this is the first great test of your character. Do you have the intestinal fortitude to withstand the scorn of the consensus? Burry did. He ignored their condescension. He ignored their laughter. He bet over $1 billion of his investors' money against the American housing market. He was not just shorting a stock. He was shorting the entire system. He was shorting the hubris of Wall Street. He was shorting the delusion of the crowd. This was not a gamble. It was an act of supreme rationality. It was a decision based not on emotion or a gut feeling, but on a deep, almost painful understanding of the underlying facts and, crucially, the perverse incentive structures that were driving the entire machine towards a cliff. He knew the bet was not if the system would collapse, but when. And now, having placed his bet against the world, he had to do the hardest thing of all. He had to wait. You have been told your entire life that being right is what matters, that if you have the facts on your side and your logic is sound, you will be rewarded. This is another comforting and dangerously simple lie, because in the real world, there is a special kind of hell reserved for the person who is right, but is right too early. This is the next and most brutal chapter in the story of Michael Burry. He had placed his bet. He had stared into the abyss, analyzed the data with cold, hard rationality, and made a decision of supreme intellectual honesty. And what was his reward? The market laughed at him. And then it moved against him. Throughout 2005 and 2006, the housing market did not collapse, it boomed. The house of cards did not just stand, it grew taller, more magnificent, more seemingly invincible. The bubble, fueled by the very insanity Burry was betting against, was still inflating, stretching to its absolute limits before the inevitable pop. This is the ultimate test for any contrarian thinker. It is one thing to have a lonely conviction in the quiet of your own office. It is another thing entirely to watch the world, day after day, week after week, month after month, prove you wrong. To watch the very assets you know are worthless become more and more valuable, while you are forced to pay millions of dollars in monthly insurance premiums, bleeding cash, waiting for the inevitable. Most people in this situation would have broken. They would have succumbed to the most powerful psychological force of all, the excruciating pain of doubt, amplified by a world united against them. The social proof was overwhelming. Every rising housing price, every confident pronouncement from a Wall Street CEO, every single person getting rich around them was a deafening scream, a global chorus saying, "You are wrong. You are the fool. Surrender." But you are not most people. You are a rational thinker, and you must understand the critical difference between being wrong and being early. The market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. To win, you do not just need a brilliant analysis. You need an iron will. You need a temperament forged in fire. The pressure on Burry was not just external, it was internal. The investors in his fund, the very people who had entrusted him with their capital, began to revolt. They were seeing massive negative returns on their statements. They were losing money while their neighbors were getting rich. They were caught in the grip of loss aversion and envy. They flooded his inbox with angry emails. They threatened to sue him. They demanded their money back. They called him a lunatic, a traitor, an idiot. They were in a state of pain-avoiding psychological denial, unable to accept the terrible truth he was trying to show them, because the short-term pain of the monthly premiums was more real to them than the abstract future catastrophe he was predicting. This is the true nature of the battle. Burry was not just fighting against the financial system. He was fighting against human nature itself. He was fighting against the hardwired primal instincts of the very people he was trying to save. To withstand this, he had to build a fortress, not of money, but of the mind. He had to have an almost superhuman commitment and consistency to his own brutal fact-based analysis. He had to shut out the noise. He had to shut out the doubt. He had to literally build a wall between himself and his own investors, at one point freezing withdrawals from the fund to prevent them from forcing him to sell at the worst possible moment. This is not a story about numbers. This is a story about courage. It is the story of a man alone in a storm of doubt, ridicule, and mounting losses, clinging to the single, solitary life raft of his own rational conviction. You have been told your entire life to trust the system, to believe in the stability of the institutions that govern our world, to have faith in the wisdom of the crowd. But what happens when the system itself is a lie? What happens when the wisdom of the crowd is revealed to be a collective madness, a mass delusion? This is the story of 2007. For 2 long, agonizing years, Michael Burry had endured the scorn of the world, the fury of his investors, and the gnawing acid-like pain of his own self-doubt. He was bleeding cash, his fund was on the brink of collapse, and the entire world was celebrating a party that he knew was a delusion built on a foundation of sand. And then it happened. The first tremor, the first sign that the house of cards, this magnificent, glittering monument to greed, was beginning to tremble. The subprime mortgage default rates, which had been ticking up slowly, suddenly began to spike, to accelerate. The teaser rates on millions of fraudulent loans were resetting, and ordinary people, as Burry had predicted with cold mathematical certainty, could not pay their mortgages. Most people at this stage were still in a state of profound psychological denial. They saw the initial defaults as a small, contained problem, a minor crack in an otherwise solid wall. The CEOs of the big banks, the experts on TV, the authority figures, they all said the same thing. A soothing lullaby of self-deception. The fundamentals are strong. This is just a minor correction in one small segment of the market. But you are not most people. You are a systems thinker. And you must see the first domino for what it is, the beginning of a chain reaction. You must understand the brutal, unforgiving logic of a positive feedback loop when it kicks into reverse. This was no longer a story about Michael Burry. This was the story of the herd finally waking up to reality, and the awakening was violent. The first wave of fear. As the defaults mounted, the most sophisticated investors began to realize that AAA mortgage bonds they owned were not safe. They were not gold. They were garbage. They started trying to sell. The liquidity crisis. But there were no buyers. The market for these complex, toxic assets froze instantly. This created a wave of panic that began to spread through the system. The great unveiling. The banks, which had been hiding billions of dollars of this toxic debt on their books, were now forced to admit their catastrophic losses. Bear Stearns, one of the oldest and most respected firms on Wall Street, collapsed in a matter of days. The global cascade. This was the moment the social proof completely inverted. The consensus shifted almost overnight from everything is fine to the world is ending. The herd, which had been stampeding into the market with greed, was now stampeding for the exits with pure primal fear. This was the death spiral. The very same psychological forces that had inflated the bubble were now causing its catastrophic self-reinforcing collapse. And in his office in Cupertino, California, Michael Burry watched it all unfold. He was not joyful. He was not triumphant. He was vindicated. He had been right. His brutal, lonely, and painful analysis of reality had been correct, while the entire confident and celebrated consensus of the world had been catastrophically wrong. His bet against the world paid off on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. His fund's value skyrocketed, generating a profit of nearly $500 million for his investors, the very people who had tried to sue him just months before. This is the ultimate reward for the contrarian thinker. It is not just the financial gain. It is the profound and quiet satisfaction of knowing that you had the discipline to see the truth when everyone else was mesmerized by a beautiful lie. But this story is not over, because seeing the truth and profiting from it also comes with a heavy and unexpected price. You have been told your entire life that being right is its own reward. That when you see the truth and the world finally catches up, you will be celebrated as a hero, a visionary, a prophet. You will be lifted onto the shoulders of the very people who once doubted you. This is the final and perhaps most bitter illusion. Michael Burry was vindicated. The system he had bet against had collapsed, exactly as he had predicted with cold, hard mathematical certainty. He had saved his investors from ruin and made them hundreds of millions of dollars. He had won. So, what was his prize? Was he hailed as a hero on the cover of every magazine? Was he invited onto every news channel to explain his genius? No. The system he had exposed did not thank him. It ostracized him. He received death threats. He was audited multiple times by the government and investigated by the SEC. He was, in the end, treated not as a savior who had exposed a massive fraud, but as a traitor who had profited from the misery of others. Most people cannot understand this. They see the financial gain and they think, he won, he must be happy. They see the story as a simple Hollywood ending. But you are not most people. You are a rational thinker. And you must understand the profound and often painful second-order consequences of being a true contrarian. You must see the price of truth. The price of seeing a truth that no one else sees is loneliness. It is the profound and often permanent loneliness of knowing that you are operating on a different wavelength from the rest of the world. It is the psychological burden of being right when the entire social and financial structure around you has a powerful incentive to believe you are wrong. This is the ultimate test of the independent thinker. It is not just about having the analytical skill to find the truth. It is about having the temperamental fortitude to live with that truth, even when it makes you an outcast. It is about having the strength to withstand not just the scorn of your enemies, but the even more painful betrayal of your own allies who could not handle the psychological pressure of the journey. Michael Burry did not emerge from this battle unscathed. The immense stress of fighting his own investors and the entire financial system took a massive personal toll. After the crisis, he closed his fund. He walked away from the game. He had proven his point, but the cost was immense. This is the final, sobering lesson of The Big Short. The lonely path of the contrarian is not a glorious one. It is a path of doubt, of ridicule, of immense psychological pressure. It requires a level of conviction and an indifference to the opinion of the herd that few people possess. Burry's story is a testament to the fact that intellectual honesty is not just a mental exercise, it is an act of profound courage. But this is not just a story about one man. It is a story about a system. And the most important question remains, what can we learn from the collapse of that system? You have now seen the full tragic arc of a modern financial hurricane. You have witnessed the storm gather. You have seen it make landfall. And you have seen the devastation it left in its wake. Most people look at the 2008 financial crisis and they see a complex technical event. They talk about credit default swaps, collateralized debt obligations, and systemic risk. They see it as a failure of a system. But you are not most people. You are a rational thinker. And you must see this for what it truly was, a psychological tragedy. The complex financial instruments were merely the weapons. The disease was a failure of the human mind. You must conduct the autopsy. The 2008 financial crisis was a perfect negative Lollapalooza effect. It was a perfect storm created by the overconfidence tendency of an entire generation of bankers who truly believed they were the masters of the universe, incapable of making a major error, plus a blind trust in flawed authority, figures the credit rating agencies, and the regulators who gave the entire system a fatal illusion of safety, plus a perverse incentive system that privatized gains, socialized losses, and rewarded short-term recklessness on an epic scale, plus a powerful global wave of social proof, where every other bank, every other fund, every other expert was playing the same dangerous game, making the insanity seem normal. All of which was protected by a profound psychological denial, a collective unwillingness to see a truth that would have ended the most profitable party in Wall Street history. So what is the ultimate Munger-esque lesson from this multi-trillion-dollar ruin? What is the wisdom you must extract? It is this. An incentive system will always trump individual morality and intelligence. The people who caused the crisis were not, for the most part, a small cabal of evil villains. They were thousands of very smart, very ambitious, and mostly ordinary people, all rationally responding to a catastrophically flawed incentive system. A bad system will make good people do terrible things. Therefore, before you trust any system, any company, or any expert, you must first and foremost analyze the incentives. The second lesson is the brutal power of contrarianism. The story of Michael Burry proves that it is possible for one person, armed with a commitment to independent thought and a willingness to do the hard work, to be right when the entire world is wrong. But it also teaches us that the price of this contrarianism is immense. It requires a temperament of iron. This, then, is the great warning of The Big Short. It is a timeless lesson that the most dangerous risks are not the ones you can see in a spreadsheet. They are the ones that are hidden in plain sight in the very fabric of human nature. But this is not just a story about Wall Street. It's a story about you. You have now seen the full story. You have seen the arrogance, the denial, and the collapse of a system that once seemed eternal. You have seen how a lone, rational mind can be right when the entire world is wrong. So what now? What do you do with this story? Most people will watch this and think, that's a fascinating, infuriating story about Wall Street. They will treat it as a movie, as entertainment. They will see it as a story about them, about Michael Burry, about the bankers, about a financial crisis that happened long ago. They will feel a moment of shock or anger, but then they will go back to their own lives and change nothing. They believe the story has nothing to do with them. But you are not most people. You are a rational thinker. You are a student of human nature, and you must see this story for what it truly is, a mirror. The 2008 financial crisis is not a them. It is a metaphor for you, your own career, your own business, your own life. The same destructive psychological forces that brought down the global economy are at work in your own world right now. Are you, like the bankers, so caught up in the social proof of your industry's best practices that you have stopped questioning if they actually make sense? Are you, like Burry's investors, so gripped by loss aversion and envy that you are afraid to take a necessary, calculated risk or are clinging to a failing strategy? Are you so deferential to the authority of experts in your field that you have outsourced your own critical thinking? This is the final brutal lesson of The Big Short. The financial crisis was not an anomaly. It was a perfect magnified reflection of the everyday irrationalities that govern human behavior. It was a story about the catastrophic danger of following the herd. So, this is the choice you face, not once in a lifetime, but every single day. Will you be the crowd? Will you find safety in the consensus, comfort in conformity, and validation in agreeing with the majority, even when your own logic whispers that something is wrong? Or will you be a Michael Burry? Will you have the intellectual courage to do your own work, to think for yourself, to withstand the ridicule of the crowd, and to stand alone with the hard, uncomfortable truth? Most people choose the comfort of the crowd. It's easier, it's warmer, it feels safer. But you must choose the lonely path, of independent thought. It's harder, it's colder, it requires a spine of steel. But it is the only path that leads to durable long-term success and a life of genuine intellectual freedom. This disciplined commitment to independent thought, to seeing reality as it is and not as the crowd wishes it were, is the ultimate goal of a worldly wise thinker. And helping you forge this very discipline is the core mission of our work here at Think Like Munger. We are dedicated to deconstructing the powerful mental models that allow for superior decision-making, helping you build your own latticework of worldly wisdom. If this deep dive into the story of Michael Burry has provided you with value, please show your support by liking this video. To continue this journey with us, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. You'll be joining a community of rational thinkers committed to a life of continuous learning. As always, check the description for a link to our free Top 5 Mental Models checklist. Now, we invite you to be courageous. In the comments below, what is one consensus belief in your own life or industry that you have started to question? Thank you for thinking with us.